The grand chamber of Nexus Prime stretched before Taeyang like a metal cathedral. He stood at the center of a circular floor, surrounded by rising tiers of seats where representatives from hundreds of alien species watched him with eyes that ranged from curious to hostile. Some had multiple eyes. Some had none at all. But all of them were focused on him, the human ambassador who had been summoned to explain the unexplainable dot above him. Holographic displays showed star maps and legal documents written in dozens of languages. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert his words into forms that beings of flesh, crystal, and pure energy could understand. Taeyang had been in this chamber many times before, but today felt different. Today felt dangerous. Council or Vorton, the ancient being who led the Galactic Council, floated in his designated space at the highest tier. His species had no solid form, existing as a mass of glowing particles that shifted between colors. When he spoke, his voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Ambassador Taeyang of Earth, Vorton said, his tone measured and careful. We have convened this hearing to address a matter of growing concern among our member species. A matter regarding your people's unique status in galactic law. Taeyang nodded slowly. He had known this day would come eventually. 300 years of privilege without explanation had made too many species uncomfortable. He could feel the weight of their stares pressing down on him. From the left tier, a figure rose. Counselor Reth of the Velkari Empire caught an imposing silhouette even among aliens. His species resembled bipedal lizards covered in iridescent scales that reflected the chamber's lights. When he spoke, his voice was sharp and accusatory. Let us speak plainly, Reth declared, gesturing toward Taeyang with a clawed hand. Every species in this galaxy must follow the universal protocol when approaching inhabited systems. Every species must transmit identification codes, wait for clearance, provide detailed cargo manifests, and maintain designated flight paths. These rules exist for one reason: safety. They prevent misunderstandings. They prevent wars. They prevent accidents that could cost millions of lives. He paused, letting his words sink in. Several other representatives nodded in agreement. Some made sounds that translation devices rendered as approval. Yet humans, Reth continued, his voice rising, are exempt from all of these requirements. Human ships can enter any system in the galaxy without permission, without identification, without following any protocols whatsoever. They can approach inhabited planets, military stations, even our most sensitive facilities, and our defense systems are programmed to let them pass freely. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Taeyang stood silent, his expression calm. He had been prepared for this moment his entire career. The Velkari Empire has followed these protocols for 12,000 years, Reth said. The Thorin Collective for 20,000. Even the ancient Moranthi, who were traveling between stars when most of our species were still learning to make fire, must follow these rules. But humanity? Humanity gets special treatment. We demand to know why. The chamber erupted in discussion. Voices overlapped in a cacophony of alien languages. Some species banged appendages on their seats. Others emitted flashes of light or releases of scented chemicals that their kind used for communication. The translation system struggled to keep up. Vorton's particles brightened, and silence fell instantly. The ancient counselor's authority was absolute in this chamber. Ambassador Taeyang, Vorton said, the council recognizes that this privilege was granted to humanity 3 centuries ago, long before you were born. However, the Valkyries' concerns are valid. In the interest of transparency and continued cooperation between our species, we ask that you explain to this assembly why humanity alone holds this exception. Taeyang took a slow breath. He had reviewed the historical records countless times. He knew the story by heart. But he also knew that telling it was not his decision to make. "Honored counselors," Taiyang began, his voice steady and clear. "Humanity did not request this privilege. We did not negotiate for it. We did not trade for it or win it through political maneuvering. This exemption was granted to us by unanimous vote of the Galactic Council in the year 2157 by your calendar. It was granted in recognition of actions taken by humans during an incident that occurred in the Kepler 442 system." "What incident?" Reth demanded. "There are no public records of any significant event in that system during that time period. We have searched the archives. We have questioned historians. No one can tell us what happened." "That is because the records were sealed," Vorton said quietly. "By order of this council." The chamber fell silent. Even the ambient hum of technology seemed to quiet. "Sealed?" Reth's scales shifted color, reflecting his agitation. Why would such information be sealed? If humans earned this privilege through some heroic act, why not celebrate it? Why not let all species know what they did? Vorton's particles swirled in a pattern that those familiar with his species recognized as deep thought. The records were sealed because those who were present believed the event spoke for itself. We believed that humanity's actions required no explanation or justification. We believed that any species worthy of joining the galactic community would simply accept our judgment. "That was 300 years ago," another voice called out. This came from Counselor Prisses of the Thorin Collective, a species that resembled ambulatory plants with bioluminescent leaves. "Times have changed. New species have joined the council who were not present during that vote. We have a right to know." Taiyang watched as more representatives voiced their agreement. He could see the situation escalating. In his earpiece, his aide whispered frantic warnings about potential diplomatic consequences. But then Vorton spoke again, and something in his tone made everyone listen. "Very well," the ancient being said. "Perhaps it is time. Ambassador Taiyang, you have our permission to share the full account of what humans did in the Kepler 442 system. Let the council judge whether the privilege was warranted." Taiyang felt a chill run down his spine. He had hoped to avoid this. The story was not one humans told with pride. It was one they told with sorrow for those who were lost. "Before I begin," Taiyang said carefully, "I must assign someone to investigate and verify the historical records. These events happened long ago, and accuracy is important." Reth's scales flickered with impatience. "Very well. I will assign one of our junior diplomats to conduct this investigation. Someone unbiased, someone who can examine the evidence objectively." From the Velkari delegation area, a young female diplomat stood. Her name was G1, and though she bore a human name, she was fully Velkari, having been named by human friends of her parents in a gesture of interspecies friendship. She bowed respectfully. "I volunteer for this task, Counselor Reth," G1 said. Her voice was younger than the others, less hardened by years of political maneuvering. "I will examine the records thoroughly and report my findings truthfully." Taiyang looked at the young Velkari and saw something in her posture. Curiosity, yes, but also openness. Perhaps she would understand. Perhaps she would see what his people had done not as a political calculation, but as something simpler and far more profound. "The investigation is approved," Gordon announced. "This hearing is adjourned until Diplomat G1 completes her research. May truth guide her path." As the chamber began to empty, Taiyang remained standing in the center of the floor. He thought about Captain Dong Haiyan and the crew of the Morning Light. He thought about the choice they had made 3 centuries ago, a choice that had changed humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Soon, everyone would know their story. Soon, the galaxy would remember why humans were different. G1 had never expected her assignment to lead her to the depths of the Council's oldest archives. The facility existed in a pocket of folded space, accessible only through special authorization. The air inside smelled of preserved documents and ancient data crystals that hummed with stored information from civilizations that had risen and fallen millennia ago. An elderly Moranthi archivist named Kyung-Soo guided her through the labyrinth of shelves. His insectoid body moved with the careful deliberation of age, his forearms handling data tablets with practiced ease. The Moranthi were known throughout the galaxy as caretakers of history and healers of the wounded, and Kyung-Soo had served in the archives for over 200 years. The Kepler 442 incident, Kyung-Soo said softly, his translator rendering his clicks and chirps into words G1 could understand. I was there, you know. I was young then, barely past my first molting. I was a medical technician aboard Sanctuary Station 7. G1's scales rippled with surprise. You were actually present during the incident? I was, Kyung-Soo confirmed. He stopped before a sealed vault door, marked with symbols G1 recognized as the highest level of classification. What I witnessed that day changed how the Moranthi viewed humanity forever. It changed how many species viewed them. The vault opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Inside, holographic projectors activated automatically, filling the small room with three-dimensional images. G1 saw star charts, ship specifications, and something else, something that made her breath catch. Combat footage. Actual recordings of a battle. Let me tell you what happened, Kyung-Soo said, settling into a resting position. 300 years ago, humanity was still new to space travel. They had only established 2 colonies beyond their home system. They were excited, naive, and completely unprepared for what they would encounter. The hologram shifted to show a large vessel. It was bulky and inelegant compared to modern ships, clearly designed for function over form. This was the Morning Light, Kyung-Soo explained. A colony ship carrying 10,000 humans in cryogenic sleep. Their destination was a planet they had designated as suitable for settlement, a journey that would take them several years, even at faster-than-light speeds. G1 studied the ship's specifications. It had minimal weapons, mostly for clearing space debris. Its defenses were basic shields meant to protect against cosmic radiation and micrometeorites. This was not a warship by any definition. The ship was commanded by Captain Dong Hyun, Kyung-Soo continued. The hologram showed a human male with tired eyes and a determined expression. He was a civilian captain, trained in navigation and colony management, not military tactics. His crew consisted of engineers, scientists, farmers, and teachers. People going to build a new world, not fight wars. The hologram changed again, this time showing a massive station floating in space. It was beautiful in its way, organic curves and crystalline structures blending with metal and energy fields. Sanctuary Station 7, Kyung-Soo said, and G1 heard emotion in his translated voice. My home, one of 12 medical stations the Moranthi maintained throughout the galaxy. We provided emergency care to any species that needed it. We took no sides in conflicts. We simply healed the wounded and sheltered those fleeing from danger. What happened to it? G1 asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The Skrull found us, Kyung-Soo said simply. G1 felt her scales go cold. The Skrull were extinct now, wiped out in a coordinated galactic effort 50 years ago. But before their extinction, they had been the galaxy's nightmare. A hive mind species that consumed other beings to expand their consciousness. They had no concept of mercy or negotiation. They simply grew and consumed and spread like a virus through space. The Skrull hive fleet appeared without warning, Kyung-Soo said. The hologram showed dark, organic ships that looked more grown than built. We had 15,000 refugees on the station. species fleeing from various conflicts across the sector. The elderly, the young, the injured. None of them could fight. Our shields were strong, but they were designed to protect against accidents, not military assault. The combat footage began to play. G1 watched as Skrull ships launched themselves at the station like living missiles. Energy weapons scarred the shields, causing them to flicker and fade. We sent out a distress call, Kyung-Soo continued. The Galactic Council fleet responded immediately. They promised to send ships, but they were 6 hours away. Our shields would fail in less than 2. The hologram showed chaos inside the station. People of dozens of species running through corridors. Medical staff trying to evacuate patients. Children crying. The universal language of fear needed no translation. Then the morning light arrived. Kyung-Soo said G-1 watched as the bulky colony ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. She saw it scan the situation, saw it receive data about the Skrull attack, saw it calculate the odds. Captain Dong Hyeon had detected our distress signal while passing through the sector, Kyung-Soo explained. He knew what was happening. He knew his ship was not equipped for combat. He knew that engaging the Skrull would likely result in the destruction of his ship and the death of everyone aboard, including the 10,000 sleeping colonists. But he engaged anyway, G1 whispered, beginning to understand. He did more than engage, Kyung-Soo said. He called for volunteers among his crew. He explained the situation clearly. He told them that galactic law did not require civilians to intervene in military conflicts. He told them that humanity had no treaty with the Moranthi, no obligation to help. He told them that they could legally turn away, and no one would blame them. The hologram showed the interior of the morning light. G1 saw Captain Dong Hyeon addressing his crew. She could not hear his words through the old recording, but she could see their faces. Fear, uncertainty, but also determination. Every single crew member volunteered, Kyung-Soo said quietly. 347 people chose to risk their lives for aliens they had never met. The battle footage continued. G1 watched in growing horror and amazement as the morning light charged toward the Skrull fleet. The colony ship was not designed for combat, but its crew improvised with terrifying creativity. Construction equipment meant for building colonies became makeshift weapons. Industrial lasers designed for mining burned through Skrull hull plating. Cargo shuttles loaded with mining explosives flew kamikaze missions into enemy ships. The crew sealed off sections of their own vessel and vented them into space, using the escaping atmosphere as thrust to dodge attacks. They fought like cornered animals, Kyung-Soo said. No training, no tactics, just pure desperation and will. They should have been destroyed in minutes. But they kept fighting. They kept adapting. Every time we thought they were finished, they found some new way to hurt the Skrull. G1 saw a human woman in the footage, working frantically at a control panel while fire spread through the corridor behind her. The subtitle identified her as Chief Engineer Hai-Jin. That section of the ship had been breached, Kyung-Soo explained. 70 people were trapped in the compartments beyond, including 20 children from the colony. The automatic seals had failed. Engineer Hai-Jin went in manually and sealed the breach from the inside. She survived? G1 asked, though she already knew the answer. No, Kyung-Soo said softly. She knew she would not survive. The radiation levels were lethal. But she sealed that breach and saved 70 lives before she died. The battle raged on in the hologram. G1 watched as the morning light took hit after hit, its hull buckling, its systems failing. She saw explosions tear through compartments. She saw crew members dying at their stations. 2 hours and 17 minutes, Kyung-Soo said. That is how long they held the line. They did not destroy the Skrull fleet. They could not. But they damaged enough ships, created enough chaos, and bought enough time for the Council fleet to arrive. The hologram showed warships dropping out of faster-than-light travel, their weapons blazing. The Skrull fleet, already weakened by the Morning Light's desperate assault, broke apart under the professional military's coordinated attack. When it was over, 212 crew members of the Morning Light were dead, Kyung-Soo said. The ship itself was a wreck, barely holding together. The sleeping colonists had survived, but their new home would have to wait for rescue and repairs. And the station? Ji-won asked. Intact, Kyung-Soo said. Every single refugee survived. 15,000 lives saved, because 347 humans decided that hearing a distress call meant responding to it, no matter the cost. Ji-won stared at the frozen hologram showing the shattered hull of the Morning Light. She tried to imagine being in Captain Dong Hyan's position. Tried to imagine making that choice. What did he say? Ji-won asked. When they asked him why he did it, Kyung-Soo's mandibles clicked in what his species used as a sad smile. The Council sent representatives to interview him while he recovered from his injuries. They wanted to understand the human decision-making process. They asked him to explain his reasoning, his calculations, his strategic assessment, and he looked confused by the question, Kyung-Soo said. Then he said, they were calling for help. What else would we do? Ji-won spent 3 days reviewing the complete battle footage. Every angle, every communication, every desperate moment was preserved in the archives. The more she watched, the less she understood how the humans had survived at all, let alone succeeded in their impossible mission. The recordings showed the Morning Light's bridge during those critical first minutes after Captain Dong Hyan made his decision. The captain sat in his command chair, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests. Around him, his crew worked with frantic efficiency at stations never designed for combat operations. All colonists secure in cryo, reported the medical officer, a young woman named Subin. Her voice shook slightly, but her hands remained steady on her controls. Life support reallocated to shield generators. We have maybe 40% more power to work with. It won't be enough, said First Officer Min-ho from the tactical station. He was pulling up schematics of their own ship, overlaying them with data about Skrull vessels. Captain, their smallest attack ship has 3 times our firepower. We count 47 ships in their fleet. Then we don't fight them ship to ship, Dong Hyan replied. His voice carried a calmness that Ji-won recognized as the forced composure of someone terrified but refusing to show it. We make them come to us. We make them think about what we might do instead of what we can do. Min-ho, what do we have that can hurt them? The first officer scrolled through their inventory. Construction lasers, mining charges, welding torches, hull sealant that burns at 3,000 degrees, cargo containers we could vent into their flight paths. Captain, we are trying to fight a military fleet with construction equipment. Then we better get creative, Dong Hyan said. He opened a ship-wide channel. All crew, this is the captain. I need volunteers for a construction team. We are going to modify our cargo shuttles. Turn them into something the Skrull won't expect. Ku-won watched as dozens of crew members abandoned their normal stations and converged on the shuttle bay. Engineers, scientists, even the ship's cook joined the effort. They worked with desperate speed, welding mining explosives to shuttle hulls, rigging remote controls, creating guided missiles out of cargo transport that the Skrull had not expected resistance from a colony ship. Their initial attack was almost casual, 3 ships breaking formation to destroy what they assumed would be an easy target. It was a fatal mistake. The Morning Light's crew launched 6 modified cargo shuttles. The Skrull ships tried to shoot them down, but the small shuttles were harder to hit than expected. When they connected with the Skrull vessels, the mining explosives detonated with enough force to tear through organic hull plating. 2. Skrull ships were destroyed outright. The third was crippled, spinning away into space with atmosphere, venting from multiple breaches. The Skrull fleet stopped being casual. They recognized a threat, even an inferior one, and responded with overwhelming force. 20 ships turned toward the morning light, their organic weapons charging with lethal energy. What followed was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was chaos wrapped in violence and desperation. The morning light could not outrun the Skrull ships. It could not outfight them. So Captain Dong Hyen did the only thing he could. He made it so expensive to kill his ship that the Skrull had to think twice about every attack. Engineering, vent Cargo Bay 3 on my mark, Dong Hyen ordered. All loose materials, everything not secured. Captain, that is half our colony supplies, Su Bin protested. Dead colonists do not need supplies, Dong Hyen replied grimly. Mark, the cargo bay doors blew open, and thousands of tons of equipment, supplies, and materials exploded into space. The cloud of debris spread rapidly, filling the space between the morning light and the attacking Skrull ships. When the Skrull tried to fly through it, the debris tore into their hulls like shrapnel. G1 watched as the crew found ways to weaponize everything on their ship. They vented coolant that froze on contact with Skrull hulls, making them brittle. They overloaded their industrial lasers to burn through Skrull shields for precious seconds. They used their shield generators as improvised EMP devices, dropping shields deliberately to release electromagnetic pulses that disrupted Skrull coordination. But the Skrull kept coming. For every ship the morning light damaged, 2 more took its place. The colony ship's hull began to fail under sustained fire. Sections decompressed. Systems went offline. People died at their stations. G1 found herself watching one sequence over and over. It showed Engineer Haijin running through a corridor filled with smoke and fire. Alarms blared. The ship shook from repeated impacts. She reached a sealed door and pulled up a damage report on a wall panel. The footage included audio from her communication device. Captain, this is Haijin. Compartment 7 has been breached. Automatic seals failed. There are 70 people trapped in the section beyond, including colony families. 20 children. Can you seal it remotely? Dong Hyen's voice crackled with static. Negative. Manual override required. The radiation levels on the other side are lethal. Estimate 90 seconds of consciousness, maybe 2 minutes before death. There was a pause. G1 could hear Dong Hyen's breathing through the communication link, could sense him trying to find another option. Haijin, you do not have to. I know, she interrupted. Tell my sister I love her. Tell her I did something that mattered. She opened the door and stepped through before anyone could stop her. The footage from the corridor camera showed her working at the manual override panel, her movements becoming slower as radiation sickness took hold. Her hands shook. She fell to her knees. But she kept working, the seal engaged with 30 seconds to spare. 70 people lived because one woman decided they were worth dying for. G-1 had to stop the recording. She sat in the archive's quiet darkness, trying to process what she had witnessed. Her people, the Velkari, prided themselves on logic and calculated risk. They had built an empire through careful planning and strategic thinking. What Haijin had done was not logical. It was not strategic. But it was something else. Something G1 did not have words for. She resumed the footage. The battle continued with brutal intensity. The morning light lost more crew members. Its chief medical officer, Jae-sung, died when the medical bay took a direct hit. Navigation officer Sung-min was killed when her console exploded. Weapons officer Tae-hee survived long enough to jury-rig one final explosive device before dying from her injuries. Through it all, Captain Dong Hyan held his crew together. G1 watched him make impossible decision after impossible decision. Which sections to seal? Which systems to sacrifice? Which crew members to send into danger? He carried the weight of every death, every sacrifice, and kept fighting. All remaining shuttles. This is the captain, Dong Hyan said in the footage. 2 hours into the battle, his voice was hoarse from shouting orders. We need to buy 5 more minutes. The Council fleet is almost here. Captain, Mino reported, we have 3 shuttles left. Not enough explosives for all of them. Then we pilot them manually, Dong Hyan said. He stood from his command chair. I will take the first one. Sir, no, Minho protested. The captain should stay with the ship. The captain should do what needs to be done, Dong Hyan replied. He looked around the bridge at his remaining crew. I am not ordering anyone to follow me. This is volunteer only. Every person on the bridge stood up. G1 watched as Captain Dong Hyan and 2 other crew members climbed into mining drones, small one-person craft designed for asteroid operations. They armed the remaining explosives and launched toward the largest Skrull ship, the one coordinating the fleet's attack. The Skrull tried to shoot them down. 2 drones were destroyed within seconds. But Dong Hyan's drone weaved through enemy fire with skill born from years of navigating asteroid fields. He flew straight at the Skrull command ship's engine core. The explosion was massive. The command ship's organic structure burned with chemical fire that spread through its systems. The Skrull fleet's coordination collapsed as their central node died. And then, like a miracle, the Council fleet arrived. Professional warships with trained crews and proper weapons made short work of the disorganized Skrull forces. When the battle ended, the morning light floated dead in space. No power, no shields. Hull breached in 17 places. Of the 347 crew members who had volunteered to fight, only 135 remained alive. But Sanctuary Station 7 was intact. 15,000 refugees were safe. And Captain Dong Hyan, against all probability, had survived his suicide run. His mining drone's emergency pod had ejected just before impact, and a Council ship had recovered him floating unconscious in the debris. Field G1 finished reviewing the footage and sat in the darkness of the archive. She understood now why the records had been sealed. Not to hide humanity's actions, but because some truths were too profound for casual examination. The humans had not fought because of treaties or obligations. They had not calculated odds or considered political advantage. They had simply heard people calling for help and responded the only way they knew how, by running toward the danger instead of away from it. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so crowded. News of G1's investigation had spread throughout the political networks, and representatives from hundreds of species demanded to be present for her report. They filled every seat, every standing space, every viewing gallery. The air buzzed with translation devices working overtime. G1 stood at the center of the chamber, where Ambassador Tae-young had stood weeks before. She held a data tablet containing her complete findings, but she did not need to reference it. She had watched the footage so many times that every moment was burned into her memory. Honored counselors, she began, her voice steady despite her nervousness. I have completed my investigation into the incident at Kepler 442. I have reviewed all archived footage, interviewed surviving witnesses, and examined the Council's original deliberations. I am prepared to present my findings. Proceed, Counselor Vorton said from his position at the highest tier. G1 activated the holographic projectors. The battle footage filled the chamber, showing the Morning Light's desperate fight against the Skrull fleet. She heard gasps from representatives who had never seen the recordings before. She heard sounds of shock and disbelief. For 30 minutes, she walked the Council through every detail. She explained the humans' lack of military training. She showed them the improvised weapons, the desperate tactics, the incredible casualties. She made sure they understood exactly what Captain Dong Hyen and his crew had sacrificed. When the footage of Engineer Haijin's death played, the chamber fell completely silent. Even the translation devices seemed to pause out of respect. By the end of the engagement, G1 concluded, 212 humans were dead. The morning light was a total loss, requiring complete reconstruction. The 10,000 colonists survived, but their colony mission was delayed by 3 years. And yet, not a single refugee aboard Sanctuary Station 7 was harmed. She paused, letting the weight of those numbers settle over the assembly. The humans had violated 63 separate galactic protocols during this incident. G1 continued. They entered a conflict zone without authorization. They engaged in military action as civilians. They risked the lives of 10,000 colonists without consulting their government or the council. By every law we have established, Captain Dong Hyen and his crew should have been court-martialed and imprisoned. Counselor Reth leaned forward in his seat. And yet they were not. Instead, they were granted the most extensive privilege ever given to any species. Why? G1 looked directly at the Velkari counselor, her mentor and superior. Because the council recognized something that transcended protocol. They recognized that humanity's first instinct when hearing a distress call was not to calculate risk versus reward or check treaty obligations. It was simply to help. The chamber erupted in discussion. Representatives argued in dozens of languages. Some praised the humans' courage. Others questioned their judgment. Still others debated the philosophical implications of emotion-driven decision-making. A Thorin collective representative named Dal Mim rose to speak. His bioluminescent leaves pulsed with agitation. This is precisely the problem. The humans acted on emotion, not logic. Yes, their actions were brave. Yes, they saved lives. But they also endangered their own colonists, violated our most fundamental protocols, and set a precedent that undermines the very foundation of galactic law. What precedent? Another voice called out. It came from a crystalline being whose species communicated through light refraction. That feelings matter more than rules, Dalnim replied. If we celebrate the humans for breaking protocol, we tell every species that emotion is an acceptable justification for ignoring law. Next time a species decides to enter a restricted system because they feel it is right, what do we tell them? That they should have calculated better? That they were not brave enough? The argument spiraled across the chamber. G1 watched as the council divided into factions. Some species sided with Dalnim's position that law must be absolute. Others argued that compassion should be valued above cold calculation. Then a figure rose from the Meranthi delegation area. It was Elder Shi Wu, one of the oldest living Meranthi and a survivor of Sanctuary Station 7. His ancient body moved slowly, but when he spoke, everyone listened. I was there, Shi Wu said simply. His translator rendered his clicks into words that carried profound weight. I was a young medic during the attack. I treated the wounded. I comforted the terrified. I watched our shields fail and believed we would all die. He activated his own holographic display, showing images from inside Sanctuary Station 7 during the battle. G1 saw crowds of refugees huddled together, parents shielding children, medical staff preparing for the worst. We had accepted our fate, Shi Wu continued. The council fleet was too far away. No one else was close enough to help. We were going to die, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Then the morning light arrived. His display shifted to show external footage of the colony ship charging into the Skrull fleet. We did not know who they were at first. We did not know they were civilians or that they carried sleeping colonists. We only knew that someone had answered our distress call. Someone was fighting for us. dying for us. People we had never met, from a species most of us had never even heard of. Shi Wu's mandibles clicked in a gesture of deep emotion. I remember when the fighting ended, when the Council fleet drove off the Skrull, and we learned the cost of our rescue. I remember talking to the human survivors, asking them why they risked everything for strangers. Do you know what they told me? The chamber was silent. They seemed confused by the question, Shi Wu said. One human, a young engineer named Yunji, looked at me with genuine bewilderment and said, "You were in trouble. How could we not help?" As if the very concept of not responding to a distress call was incomprehensible to her. He turned to face Counselor Dalnim directly. "You say the humans acted on emotion rather than logic. You are correct. But I ask you this. If we cannot trust those who run toward danger to save strangers, then who can we trust? If we cannot celebrate those who risk everything for others without expectation of reward, then what are we celebrating?" Dalnim's leaves pulsed with uncertainty. "Elder Shi Wu, with respect, the humans could have endangered—" "They endangered themselves," Shi Wu interrupted. "They risked their own lives, their own mission, their own futures. They did not force anyone else to join their sacrifice. Every crew member volunteered. Every person on that ship made a conscious choice to value the lives of strangers over their own safety." Another representative spoke up, this one from a species G1 did not recognize. But what if their gamble had failed? What if they had died, and the refugees had died anyway? Would we still celebrate their courage? "Yes," Shi Wu said without hesitation, "because the value of an action is not determined solely by its outcome. The humans could not know they would succeed. The odds were overwhelmingly against them. They fought anyway because it was right, not because it was safe." Ambassador Tae Yang finally spoke from his position among the human delegation. The Council faced a unique problem 300 years ago. How do you punish people for saving 15,000 lives? How do you imprison someone for running toward danger when everyone else ran away? You cannot. But more than that, you should not. He stood and walked to the center of the chamber, joining G1. The Council in 2157 made a decision that transcended politics. They recognized that humanity had revealed something fundamental about our character. We respond to distress calls. It is not a strategy. It is not a negotiating tactic. It is simply who we are. And the privilege? Reth asked, his voice softer now, less accusatory. The unrestricted access to any system? Was granted, Vorton interjected, because the Council, determined that any species whose first instinct is to help others, could be trusted not to abuse such freedom. In 300 years, has humanity ever used their privilege for conquest? For espionage? For any purpose other than rendering aid? Silence answered him. No one could cite a single example of humans abusing their status. The privilege was not favoritism, Vorton continued. It was recognition. Humanity earned the right to go wherever they wish, because the galaxy is safer when they are free to respond to those who need help without bureaucratic delays. G1 looked around the chamber and saw understanding beginning to spread. Representatives who had arrived angry or suspicious now were expressions of contemplation. Even Dalnim's leaves had stopped pulsing with agitation. "I have one more piece of evidence to present," G1 said. She activated a final holographic recording, this one dated just 5 years after the Kepler 442 incident. This is footage of a Velkari science vessel that suffered engine failure near a black hole's gravity well. They were trapped, unable to escape, their hull slowly being pulled apart by gravitational stress. The footage showed a human rescue ship arriving at dangerous speed. The ship was small, only a crew of 15, but they maneuvered into the gravity well without hesitation. That rescue ship was commanded by Captain Bio Ra, G1 said. Ambassador Taeyang's grandmother. At the time, the Velkhori Empire and humanity were in the middle of trade negotiations that would eventually fail. Relations between our species were strained. But when the distress call came, Captain Biora did not check the political situation. She did not consult with her government. She simply went. The footage showed the human ship using its own engines as a tether, holding the Velkhari vessel free of the gravity, well at enormous risk to themselves. All 17 Velkhari scientists survived, G1 concluded. Captain Biora died 3 months later from radiation poisoning she received during the rescue. The gravity well's environment exceeded safe exposure limits. She knew the risks. She went anyway. Guy-1 turned to face Counselor Reth directly. My own father was one of those scientists. I exist because a human woman decided that saving Velkhari lives was worth dying for, even though our species barely knew each other and had no formal alliance. The revelation sent ripples through the Velkhari delegation. Reth's scales shifted through several colors as he processed this information. This is why humans are granted entry without permission, she once said, her voice ringing through the chamber. Not because they are special, not because they are superior, but because 300 years of history has proven, again and again, that when humans arrive unannounced, it is because someone needs help. The council chamber remained in session for 6 more hours after G1's presentation. Representatives debated, questioned, and examined every piece of evidence she had gathered, but the conclusion was inevitable. By the time Councillor Vorton called for a vote on whether to revoke humanity's privilege, the outcome was already certain. The motion failed by unanimous decision. Not a single species voted to restrict human access. 3 days later, G1 found herself in a small observation deck aboard Nexus Prime, staring out at the stars. She had requested this meeting, and Ambassador Taeyang had agreed to come alone, without his usual staff or security detail. Thank you for meeting me, G1 said as Taeyang entered the observation deck. I wanted to speak with you privately before I returned to the Velkhari delegation. Of course, Taeyang replied. He joined her at the viewport, looking out at the same stars. You did well in the hearing. Your investigation was thorough and fair. I learned things I did not expect to learn, G1 admitted. When Counselor Reth assigned me this task, I thought I would find evidence of political manipulation or hidden agreements. I thought humanity's privilege was the result of some backroom deal. Instead, I found something much simpler and much more profound. She turned to face him. Why does your species do it? Why do humans run toward danger when every logical calculation says you should run away? Taeyang was quiet for a moment, considering the question. I have thought about that question my entire career. I have studied the incident at Kepler 442. I have read every interview with the survivors. And I think the answer is this. We do not see it as a choice. What do you mean? When Captain Donghayan heard that distress call, he did not sit down and list the pros and cons of intervening. He did not calculate the odds of success or consider the political ramifications. He heard people in trouble, and his immediate thought was, what can I do to help them? The decision to act came before the logical analysis, not after. G1's scales rippled with confusion. But that is dangerous. Acting before thinking leads to mistakes. Sometimes, Taeyang agreed. But it also leads to action when action is needed. My grandmother, Captain Biora, used to tell me something when I was young. She said the galaxy does not need more people following rules. It needs more people doing what is right. But how do you know what is right without rules to guide you? You listen to that voice inside that tells you when someone needs help, Taeyang said. You pay attention to the feeling in your chest when you see someone suffering. You trust that the instinct to protect others is not weakness, but strength. He gestured to the stars beyond the viewport. Every species out there has rules and protocols. Every civilization has spent thousands of years developing systems to maintain order and prevent chaos. These things are important. These things keep the galaxy functioning. But sometimes, in the space between rules and action, people die. And humans decided long ago that we would rather risk breaking rules than risk ignoring someone who needs help. Kai Wan thought about this. She thought about Engineer Hai Jin walking into lethal radiation to save children she had never met. She thought about Captain Dong Hyan flying a mining drone into an enemy command ship. She thought about her own father, alive because Captain Bayora decided that Velkari lives mattered even though their species barely knew each other. I read something in the archives, Gawan said quietly. A sealed document signed by every council member from 300 years ago. It contained the official reasoning for granting humanity their privilege. Would you like to know what it said? I have never read it, Tae Yang admitted. The document remains classified to humans as well. It said, humanity has proven that their first instinct is not conquest, not calculation, but compassion. Any species that responds to distress signals at the cost of their own survival has earned the right to go wherever they wish, for the galaxy is safer with them, unshackled by bureaucracy. Tae Yang smiled. That sounds like something Councillor Vorton would write. He has always had a way with words. There is more, G1 continued. The document lists every distress call humanity has responded to in the 300 years since Kepler 442. Do you know how many there are? I do not. 1,247, G1 said. 1,247 times. Human ships have detected distress signals and responded without hesitation. Mining crews trapped in asteroid collapses. Colony ships stranded by engine failures. Medical emergencies on remote stations. Natural disasters on developing worlds. Every single time, humans arrived and helped, regardless of the species, regardless of the political situation, regardless of the risk. She pulled up a data tablet and showed Tae Yang the list. Names and dates scrolled past, each one representing lives saved by humans who simply refused to ignore calls for help. This is why the privilege stands, G1 said. Not because of one heroic incident 300 years ago, but because humanity has spent 3 centuries proving that Councillor Vorton's trust was well placed. They stood in silence for a while, watching ships come and go from the station's docking ports. Some were human vessels, easily identified by their distinctive design. Others belonged to species from across the galaxy, each with their own history and culture. What will you do now? Tae Yang asked. Return to the Valkyrie delegation? Eventually, G1 replied. But first, I have requested a transfer. I want to work in the Council's Emergency Response Coordination Center, where distress calls are received and rescue missions are organized. Tae Yang raised an eyebrow. That is a significant career change for a Valkyrie diplomat. I know, G1 said. But watching those recordings, learning about your species' history, it changed something in me. I spent my whole career following protocols and calculating political advantages. Now, I want to do something that actually matters. I want to help coordinate responses so that when someone calls for help, we can get the right people there as fast as possible. And if that means bending some rules? Tae Yang asked with a slight smile. Then I will bend them, G1 said firmly, because I finally understand what my father meant when he told me that Captain Bidora looked him in the eyes while pulling his ship from that gravity well. He said she did not look like someone performing a duty. She looked like someone who could not imagine doing anything else. Tae Yang nodded approvingly. You will do well in that position. The galaxy needs more people like you. People who understand that compassion and protocol do not have to be enemies. As if summoned by their conversation, an alarm chimed softly through the observation deck. It was the general alert that all council personnel carried, notifying them of priority communications. T. Young checked his device, and his expression shifted to one of concern. "Distress call," he said. "Science vessel experiencing catastrophic systems failure in the outer rim. Hull breach imminent. 43 crew members aboard. How far away is the nearest council response ship?" G1 asked. Tae Young checked the data. 4 hours at maximum speed? And human ships? There is a human cargo vessel in the sector. The Bright Hope, registered out of Mars. They are 90 minutes away. Even as he said it, another notification came through. Tae Young read it and smiled. The Bright Hope has already changed course. They are moving to intercept at maximum speed. Did they wait for authorization? G1 asked, though she already knew the answer. No, Tae Young confirmed. They detected the distress call and responded immediately. Standard human protocol, which is to say, no protocol at all beyond someone needs help. So we go help them. G1 watched through the viewport as a human cargo ship detached from one of the station's docking arms. Its engines flared bright blue as it accelerated away from Nexus Prime. Heading toward coordinates where 43 beings she would never meet needed rescue. "That is what makes humans different," she said softly. "Not your technology or your military capabilities or your political systems. It is that, the absolute certainty that when someone calls for help, you answer. No hesitation. No calculation. Just action. It is who we are," Tae Young said simply. "It is who we have always been." Captain Dong Hyen did not create something new when he chose to fight for Sanctuary Station 7. He simply revealed something that was already there, something fundamental to human nature. And the Council recognized that, G1 said. 300 years ago, they looked at humanity and saw a species that valued other lives as much as their own. They saw people who would risk everything for strangers. And they decided that such people should never be delayed by bureaucracy, when seconds could mean the difference between life and death. She turned away from the viewport to face Tae Yang directly. "I came into this investigation believing humanity's privilege was unjust. Now I understand it is the most just thing the Council has ever done. You earned this right in blood and sacrifice. You maintain it through 3 centuries of consistent action. And the galaxy is safer because you are free to respond when you are needed most. Thank you," Tae Young said quietly. "That means more than you know, coming from you." "Tell me something," G1 asked. "If the Council ever did revoke your privilege, if they demanded humans follow the same protocols as everyone else, what would your people do?" Tae Young did not hesitate. "We would follow the new rules. We would submit proper documentation and wait for authorization like everyone else, right up until we detected a distress call. Then we would break every rule necessary to help whoever needed us, even knowing it could result in your ships being destroyed by automated defenses."